every word you spoke, every move you made could be used against you. Romania, 1989, dimly lit streets. Secret police offices, long, endless lines for scraps of food that could barely feed you or your family. A country gripped by fear, betrayal, and revolution. We are taking a deep dive into the very oppressive regime that overtook Central Southeastern Europe. The revolution that occurred in Romania stands out for its rapid escalation, violent suppression, and dramatic fall of a dictator. It also highlights the limits of oppressive regimes in the face of popular discontent and serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of authoritarianism. From economic mismanagement to personality cults, surveillance police, and deadly protests, and a revolution that unraveled the very fabric of an authoritarian regime. Join me as we unravel this very gripping tale of courage, rebellion, and the costs of freedom. Hello, my name is Kale, and I am a Doctor of Pharmacy candidate documenting both medical and non-medical mysteries on my journey to the PharmD. I never thought I would tackle a subject so sensitive, and I still kind of grasp trying to figure out how to approach these things with the limited knowledge that I still have about these things, but it always enamors me to immerse myself in these types of stories that plague our history and things that are not really taken to our history classes or to the lights pretty often. It's no secret that human history has a very awful track record with pushing a lot of evil things forward, and some of these things get hidden or swept under the rug. A lot of these times we can highlight these stories through us engaging and learning about these things willingly. So I felt compelled to bring this story to light, and it's very on time for the holiday season, as this is a very dark story that happened around the very most jolliest and forgiving times of the year. The inspiration for this story is I Must Betray You, hope you guys can see that, by Ruta Sepetys. Right there. The semester's over, and I said, time to get back into reading. I haven't even been in the forefront on this channel for a while because school be schooling, okay? I wanted to blindly read something, so I picked it up knowing nothing about it. I just remember I bought this because it talked about historical fiction, and I am in my historical fiction type of era right now. Oh, cool. It says Romania 1989. Don't know much about Romania. Wanted to read it. As you can see, very fitting cover. It is December right now, and we get a lot of clouds and snow. So the cover itself just was okay, good thing reading this. Also, how fitting that it is a story about the downfall of a tyrannical dictator on Christmas Day. How fitting the holiday season is here. Why not just read about and talk about this? Now, of course, this regime carried on for years, but it's not to go unnoticed that acts of revolution started planting seeds from early. December 25th, 1989 wasn't the only time that the revolution took place. There were acts of it throughout times in this season of oppression. And I Must Betray You takes you into the heart of an oppressive regime run by Nicolae Ceausescu. I have trouble pronouncing his name, but I believe it's Ceausescu, seen through the eyes of 17-year-old Christian. Basically, he is an aspiring writer, and he is forced to become an informer by the Securitate, another word that I was am I pronouncing it right? He has two choices to make: either betray his family or betray his country in a way. It doesn't work out in his favor, because if he doesn't follow one side, he can die, and if he doesn't follow another side, he can also die. Granted, I did not know about Ceausescu prior to reading the story, and I'm thankful for books like this and people that have the courage to create these stories, travel to these areas, and bring light to these situations so we that choose to do so can engage in this type of knowledge and feed ourselves with this type of knowledge. For many, it just marked an anniversary for the downfall of tyranny within an South Central Eastern um, Europe region. As Christmas just passed, it is definitely for those people a mix of joy and grief. Joy because they finally eradicated this oppressive regime, but also grief for the people that were lost and even just the memories associated with it. And I truly believe that we all should immerse ourselves in these stories so that we can nurture and garner empathy for these types of situations and just have these conversations. Don't worry, we're going to get into all the nitty gritty, dark, twisted history of Romania 1989 or Romania 1960s to the 80s. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel if you're here for unraveling all the hidden truths that plague our world, both medical and non-medical. Also, my Instagram is KaleEspree. I'll have it somewhere on the screen. You can follow me there and leave me some suggestions and stories that you think that I should engage in or read in, and we can discuss about them and talk about them here on this channel. I'm here for it. Be sure to follow me over there as well. Let's break down what we know. The man that fathered this oppressive regime was known as Nicolae Ceausescu, and he was actually in power since 1965, initially positioning himself as a relatively independent communist leader. By the 1970s and 1980s, however, his communist regime actually devolved into one of the most oppressive ones in Eastern Europe. One key way that he did this was by economic mismanagement. Ceausescu pursued a policy of rapid industrialization and heavy foreign borrowing, leaving the country in massive debt. Throughout the novel, we see many of the characters pay for items or even information with Kent cigarettes. Because the Romanian dollar was so devalued, people viewed Kent cigarettes as the best currency and even valued them more than human life, especially by those in power. To repay these debts, he imposed brutal austerity measures, leading to widespread poverty, food shortages, and energy rationing. According to an article by Latham, in an effort to pay off the large foreign debt that his government had accumulated through mismanaged industrial ventures in the 1970s, Ceausescu in 1982 ordered the export of much of the country's agricultural and industrial production. The resulting extreme of shortages in food, energy, medicines, and other basic necessities drastically lowered living standards and intensified unrest. Ceausescu initially identified Romania with ideals of Stalin, and it was through this that Romania actually fell into a state of disarray. Essentially, the standard of living deteriorated. The article further states that areas of the West withdrew the financial credits, commercial advantages that was earlier granted to Romania as a reward for its independence and to keep the economy afloat. Ceausescu fell upon the help of the Soviet Union. He caught this genius idea to bulldoze many of the Romanian houses and villages and basically move residents to these centralized type of areas. And we see this in the novel where many of the pets, namely dogs, that were housed with families, once the bulldozing happened, they were left to the streets and started moving around in packs so that they can find food. And through this, they basically attacked people because they were so hungry. There is a scene in the book where Christian and his lady friend are walking home, and she carries a stick intentionally for these reasons to ward off any stray dogs from attacking her. Communities that once lived in solidarity were targeted, where education systems were curtailed in places like Transylvania. And yes, Transylvania is actually a real place, not just the movie, although that movie slaps. Places like Transylvania did have a very intense reform. Additionally, many regions that house Saxon and Jewish populations were ideally targeted to be immigrated back to regions like West Germany. There is an insert in the book where Sepetys actually states the statistic of the Jewish population and how it rapidly declined in the reign of Ceausescu. In this chilling fact, she states, Romania had nearly 700,000 Jewish residents. In 1989, only 23,000 remained. Ceausescu demanded a per-head payment for Jewish inhabitants to be relocated to Germany, Israel, or other countries. In a nation of nearly 20 million people, Romania's Jewish population today is approximated at only 3,000. Furthermore, Ceausescu ordered that education should remain under strict surveillance. Let it be known, though, that Ceausescu's highest level of education was primary school. Let that sink in. I don't know how he was in any position to lead any group of people or assume this state of power. It is kind of scary to see that someone with only that level of education was granted this much power over an entire nation. Kids were brought up initially to serve the state. They went to school 7 days a week, and school actually ended for them at 7 p.m. A lot of the people in charge were actually called comrade directors, and they taught the children in the classroom to actually be comrades as well. The idea of addressing your fellow Romanian as a comrade was to instill this level of unity in a way where everyone is seen as one, but there's no autonomy, essentially. Ideally, on the surface, you think, oh, there's no way to have any bad thoughts or evil thoughts, but if the person that is leading is evil, then that communist regime is inherently bad. Autonomy is always such a beautiful thing. If you can't have your own sense of opinion or sense of way of living, how do we essentially describe humanity? Ceausescu, however, didn't value or believe in this type of thinking, hence why he led Romania the way that he did. Additionally, another way that this type of regime was elucidated was the way women were targeted. If you were a woman of childbearing age in this time, you were expected to have loads of children. I don't even think there is a limit or number. If you had a certain amount of children, you were described as doing your maternal duty to Romania. If you didn't have a certain amount of children, or you purposely refrained from having children, that choice of having children, your house was essentially taxed higher, and you were reprimanded and viewed as someone that is essentially the enemy within. Birth control within the state was removed off of shelves, and abortion was considered a crime. Essentially, Ceausescu's ineffective and unproductive economy proved to be disastrous for people's lives. So everyone's lives were uprooted, but not his. He was living lavish and doing everything that he pleased, but his way of leading his people was to live different and apart from him, but they all must be the same. Honestly, makes it even more strange why he wanted families to consistently push out children and have these big families when the economy was so messed up and he kept people down in that way. It also makes you wonder how an authoritarian government could essentially expect people to want to take in this level of living and be okay with it, and how they expect to be prosperous, despite many people likely agreeing that it was more of a terrible way of living. Ceausescu and his wife developed a cult of personality. Any form of dissent, disagreement, or judgment of their type of rule was punished. They were portrayed as infallible figures. Public adoration was mandatory, and dissent was harshly punished. Keeping people against each other by instilling paranoia among your community was a key way that he stayed in power. After demolishing many homes and ushering people into centralized environments, privacy was no more a luxury. This is seen with a great, and when I mean great, I mean great depiction of Christian when he's walking up the stairs. He clearly and vividly details on what occurs on each level of the apartment. He lives on the 4th floor, so he had to obviously walk up the stairs and hear everything that's going on. Like he would say he would hear a baby crying on the 1st floor, or he would hear a man yelling at his wife on the 2nd floor, and then he would hear his grandfather coughing on the 4th floor. When they moved these people to these centralized apartments to keep these buildings where the walls were intentionally made thin so that informers could hear what's going on, and that if there's any type of dissent or any type of revolution brewing, they would immediately know about it and they can just stop that right then and there. Freedom of speech was taken away with these centralized apartments. Even things that you could write down were considered illegal. Illegal jokes, illegal thoughts. Yes, your thoughts were considered illegal as well. But of course, how can they prove what you're thinking? Informers were brought up by the Securitate. They brought on informers to basically be the eyes for them as people that lived among Romanians. Securitate agents obviously had their uniforms. They had a distinct look to them. In the book were described as people with big hands and I guess burly features and I guess big men. Informers, you can't be as sure when you're dealing with somebody that looks like a normal person that lives among you. So if you're unsure of what the Securitate was, like me, they are essentially an organization that maintain a stronghold on the population through surveillance, intimidation, and arrest. It basically became one of the most feared state security apparatuses in the Eastern Bloc. By the late 1980s, discontent was widespread, but public resistance remained suppressed for fear of the Securitate. Oftentimes, we get page inserts throughout the novel of what people think were private interactions between them and their loved ones that were actually heard and reported on and kept in files for you. Files based on you that you had no access to and that you had no idea was even being taken on you. They oftentimes kept several separate files for each individual within the state, and they would refer to that file to see, say somebody says something that is a little bit off the mark of what they consider normal, they would refer to your file and see, how many times have they said something like this? Or if you said it many times, like Christian's grandfather usually did, which was the symbol of the book of not forgetting your voice, Bunu. He was one that just didn't care. He was just like, I'm going to say anything I want to say, and that was it. Christian, it was like a gradual time of him growing his voice. They would document that and keep that and be like, okay, you trying to start some stuff, we got something for you, It was very invasive, as uncomfortable and inhumane as you would imagine. According to an article by Balkan Insight, an individual that lived throughout this communist regime in the 80s was actually allowed to go through their file and was disgusted to see what they saw. It reads, a Securitate patrol was permanently in front of the house. Telephone conversations were intercepted, and the individual was continuously interrogated. The individual goes on to state, I found a list with the name, profession, and motives of those who informed on him. One of them, a prominent peasant party leader, said he knew the individual since his youth and decided to inform on him as he was an immoral person because he liked to play bridge. Another informer was a doctor and friend who was said to have collaborated in exchange for a visa to see his daughter. Again, in an environment where paranoia and fear are the central fabric in a nation, there's gonna be some sort of selfish intent sprinkled somewhere within there. A lot of the times, becoming informers was to help yourself or to help someone that you loved. But undoubtedly, people experiencing this on a day-to-day basis are going to start challenging this narrative and eventually want to push back. And although people want to change, it was a matter of how they were going to go about to receive that change. Many European nations that were under the communist regimes slowly but surely began to start eradicating themselves from the communist movement. We see this clearly depicted in the book where countries that surrounded Romania were being liberated, and Romania itself was left in the dust, per se. I very much so appreciated how this author depicted how the confusion you feel as like your state is the only one that's not making change, or the people around you seem like they're not making change. And it makes you feel like this sadness, but also equal anger at yourself and the people around you. The best way that this was done was a scene in the book where Christian takes a trip to the library. He comes across this magazine, a Time magazine, that showed Ceausescu and his wife taking vacations to Disneyland. They were out here going to England, seeing the Queen of England. Unashamedly, it fueled something in Christian. First it was confusion, and then it was also like, ain't no way. It was denial. And then there was also like anger at the very end. Although he disagreed with the communist lifestyle and what they represented, he probably felt like when he was oppressed that everybody was oppressed, including the leader. And although he knew there was different luxuries that a leader could have, he also probably was like, there's no way that he's out here leaving the country, taking his passport, flying out to other areas, doing what he wants to do, while we here are suffering. And, like standing up in food lines, hoping to receive, good food for you and your family for the week, but only receiving like an onion the size of an olive or a small water bottle filled with oil. Like these things really affected people. And it's like he couldn't fathom it. And it really lit the fire for what he wanted to join and started the brewing of this revolution. Now, of course, that's like a fictional adaptation of that. But it makes me wonder, like, the people at that time, what was their breaking point? To hell with this type of lifestyle, something needs to give. As I said before, the revolution had its moments of starting, but it didn't get to the point of obviously taking to the streets for fear of being dealt with in a harsh manner. The points of revolution were still there. People still partook in luxuries. For example, taking Western movies, smuggling them through the black market, and then having them translated into the Romanian language. There was actually a woman that did this. I'll probably find her name and put her name somewhere here, and allowed people to have that sense of freedom, but in secret. Those were ideas and signs and actions of revolution. The immediate trigger for the revolution came in a region named Timisoara. Timisoara, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, which is a city in western Romania in mid-December 1989. What started off as peaceful protests turned violent as government officials opened fire on them, killing dozens of people. Public anger fueled off of this and ignited a protest nationwide. The timeline is essentially as follows. Timisoara uprising took place from December 16th to December 20th. Ceausescu's final speech in an attempt to calm the public down took place on December 21st. The Bucharest uprising took place from December 21st to December 22nd. This is the point where the army actually started siding with the people of Romania, removing that stronghold iron fist that Ceausescu had over the nation. Once you lose the army, it's kind of like, who's your squad, Roughly a week, shockingly. It's kind of crazy to see how the army kind of shifted in the span of roughly a week. So it makes you question, like, did they really truly support the regime, or were they actually waiting for others to take that stand? I had to do a quick Google search just to be sure to see like what defined this dilemma, and it essentially defines it as the bystander effect, which is a form of social conformity. in order for that change to occur, everyone wanted it, but they wanted to minimize the risk associated with it. And they did this by observing what people did acting first. It was so jarring to witness the public's shift in dynamic. It makes me question, like, were they kind of looking at the military kind of with a bombastic side eye? Like, you were the ones oppressing us and now you on our side in the span of a week. Why were you waiting for us? Especially when you guys have the actual military power and weapons to stop any regime that could be occurring. But I guess a way of thinking of it is they perceived it as the greater evil, Ceausescu, being removed, and that outnumbered their care for the lesser evil just abruptly joining them despite oppressing them for so many years. Because we mustn't forget that a lot of the time kids were brought into this type of lifestyle to become officers of the state from a young age. Initially, they're taught to live these lives and do these things. But somewhere deep down buried within, everyone knew that to be under the thumb of someone that didn't care for their best interests at heart wasn't a way to live human life. So it definitely surfaced for everybody at its own time and its own pace. And I'm glad that they could all experience and enjoy this victory together, regardless of what side they came from. On December 22nd, it led to Ceausescu's inevitable downfall, where him and his wife fled Bucharest by helicopter. They got up out of there after the military turned on them. However, they were later captured that day, and on December 25th, Christmas Day, they underwent a trial where a hastily organized military tribunal convicted them of genocide, corruption, and other crimes, and were later executed by firing squad later that day. Merry Christmas to them, I guess. Now, there's more to say to this story because shortly after this, another communist regime actually rose up and tried to take over what Ceausescu built and continue this. But of course, it wasn't as severe as what Ceausescu already had in place. And people, of course, weren't standing for a lot after dealing with Ceausescu. But yeah, they really tried their big one. They tried to come out. They tried to continue the regime. Didn't work. It's important to note that the exact time that Romania declared its democracy is unsure. It's unclear. And that's greatly portrayed in the book at the very end, where Christian kind of tries to deal with how to move on past these horrors and to want answers but not receiving them fully. A lot of these things remain unknown, but the main takeaway of this is this horrible act and this horrible regime did occur in Romania. There's no doubting that now that we see the truths uncovered. The brutality of Ceausescu left a lasting impact on many, and probably still leaves an impact on many for years to come. There were ongoing debates of the effectiveness of the post-revolution reforms and the lingering influence of former communist elites. If you want to learn more about this story, this is a great place to start. It's historical fiction, heavy on the word fiction, because it's a book told through the eyes of a fictional character, but the stories remain true. If you want to get into reading, if you want to get into historical fiction in general, or if you just want to read just and learn about this one only instance, start here. A lot of sources were used for this, which I very much so appreciated by Ruta Sepetys. She did her homework, okay? She really did her homework. The chapters are short, so anyone that's not even an avid reader, you're going to feel like you didn't even read that much because you turn a page and the chapter is like almost short. Like, let me show you. Chapter 66, right? Turn the page, and see the chapters on like 2 pages. And then you get to chapter 67. Like, that's basically how short the chapters are, which I very much so appreciated because I burned through this book very quickly, reading it in parts, then coming back to it, because it definitely is a heavy read. I know people could actually finish this in like one sitting, even a day, if they really wanted to. But she does her homework, and there's actually some very cool pictures in the back. This one here, I hope you could see it, of like the Time magazines that Christian found in the library. And when there's like this cool picture here, you could see Ceausescu's palace at the top, and then underneath you see the environment that his people were living in. So it's a very interesting contrast. I really admire that she put those right next to each other. I really like this one at the front where there's students, young students like me, my age, out here protesting in the street. And then here we have them confronting some Romanian Securitate agents, military agents. Like, oh my gosh, this has so much that needs to be uncovered. And I'm so glad and fortunate that I was able to read it and immerse myself in it and learn from it. And here at the front, I just love that with Christian carrying this flag with the communist symbol carved out from the middle. And it's like, oh, this is his palace, Ceausescu's palace. I just recognize that now, and he's like walking towards it. I love that, period. That is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I am going to be trying to be consistent as much as I can throughout this break. But I'm almost there to the Farm D. I got like a year and a half left, but I know like during the semester it's so much. Again, be sure to like and subscribe and follow me on my Instagram, Kale Esprit. Leave me any suggestions that you want or any stories that you think I should uncover and learn about as well, and I'm open to them. I'm open to learning. There's so much out there. And as I always say, be sure to smile more, appreciate life more, and I'll see you guys next time.